Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Arsenal Pass Time in the Round, episode 20. Today it's just me and Hayden. We're heading off to Orlando pretty quick here. I think I head out tomorrow afternoon, and then Hayden's got a nice couple day trek over from Australia. What does it end up being? It's like 24 hours or something like that.
It's about 23 and a half hours. It's almost a day of travel. I leave my time Thursday morning. The cool thing about heading to Orlando, I guess, or heading to the US, heading east, is that I leave, I think, 10:30 a.m. on Thursday. I arrive into LA about 6 a.m., I think, and then fly to Orlando. And then obviously you lose some time from LA to Orlando again. So I get in about 6 o'clock, I think. So on the same day that I left. So it's not terrible. It'll just be making sure the jet lag doesn't get me on the Thursday.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. I definitely couldn't do it. I would probably be too jet lagged, but we'll see. So I get in on Wednesday. Dante and Hayden both get in on Thursday. And yeah, we won't have much time. Pretty much testing is done. Like, we have locked in our decks. It's interesting. We were talking about this. Hayden and I have reflected on this quite a bit, but I think that kind of like post mortem and like looking back, our testing will actually probably be a failure despite the results, which is interesting. And it's like an interesting thing to acknowledge too, right? And I was really proud in Monarch with like what we achieved and how comfortable we were on our deck and just like how well developed it was. But in this format, just because we spent so much time in sealed, I didn't think we appreciated like how little time we had once the date started closing in, right? Like the time that we all started testing as construct as a team was like about it's the week before Dallas, so pretty soon. And we actually spent a lot of time on like a lot of different decks. So
I think it was later.
I guess so we can make that kind of our
Cincinnati. I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like the
was
week
it Cincinnati?
Yeah. So we've only had 2 weeks testing as a team. I think the week of Dallas, so we played some sealed, and then the week of Dallas, me and Dan, so the two of us, we swapped to constructed. But I think for us, it was like just find out, where some of the decks sit for the format for the rest of the team, because I hadn't planned to go to Orlando. It wasn't on really the horizon at that point. So it was just play decks, find out matchups. Really interesting time, I think, because the format has been and still remains pretty open. And then, like that 2 weeks of testing and hindsight, it really catches up to you just how short a time that is, especially when you're working across time zones.
Yeah, and I think this is like a good first topic. So like let's talk about like some of the main mistakes we might have made, right? I don't think these would be mistakes in the context of like a larger testing season. But with the time we were working with, which I don't think we accurately sort of budgeted for, we started out playing like a lot of decks. Like we played a lot of like just good decks, right? So the first question was like, how do you beat Prism and how do you just destroy Prism? Because you don't want to actually be playing matches versus Prism. You just want to buy because it'll be at that point a significant proportion of the meta. And it still would have been, but we've had some recent results that may have changed that. So we were looking at like Rhino. We were playing around with Bravo, some Viscerai, all these kind of like mid-range, just like good stuff decks. And I actually thought that Rhino might be a pretty good pick for a while. And that was one of our main contenders. It never felt like fantastic though, right? Which is kind of where Rhino lands in a lot of metas. I think that he's like, that hero's, that hero's power level is very contextual on what decks will be at the tournament, right? So yeah, I mean, you destroy Prism. You can have a decent match in a Bravo. I don't know if it's Rhino favored, but then there still could be a bunch of aggro Katsus hanging around. So that makes it tough, right? So a bit of the way through, one of the other players in our group was playing Earth Briar, and it was doing pretty well. And we were also playing Lightning Briar as well, just kind of exploring Briar. We didn't do too much testing with Oldheim, to be honest, and minimal Lexi, but we did test it. Yeah, we did sort of come to appreciate that Briar looked like it was in a good position. The hero ability, or whatever you might call it, looked quite good as well. So we were on Lightning, we were on Earth, and I think at one point, just kind of the narrative for Earth got pushed a little bit because the Earth deck that we were on was very unrefined. It just absolutely destroyed Prism. Like it was not even close. It was almost worse than Reinhardt. It was terrible for Prism. And it was also extremely good into Bravo, and then just very, very powerful into any deck that didn't have a game plan for it. And yeah, it was just kind of funky how it played out like that. So we're like, we have this like 60 card list. We'll try it out in the ProQuest. We'll see what happens. Obviously, at all these tournaments, none of us were really planning to play in the ProQuest, but that's just sometimes how it goes. So I played it. Zach and I both played it in the ProQuest in Cincinnati. I went 7-1, so I went undefeated up to the semifinals. I lost the chain, a matchup that pretty quick into like even testing that deck at all. We realized like, yeah, this deck's worst matchup is Chain, which is good and bad, right? Because we saw the departure of Chain. A lot of players hopped off of it. The power level of Chain looked very, very low. And all lists that were out there, like I personally wasn't a fan of. So we're like, okay, it's a bad matchup, but it's like the bad matchup. Like it's the only really one that we can sort of acknowledge at this point. But yeah, so after Cincinnati, the deck seemed like a reasonable kind of pick. We really needed to like build an entire board plan, build in probably almost maybe reinvent some of the main deck. Like it was pretty unrefined at that point. But yeah, it looks like Lightning Briar, which also top 4'd that event. But it's not just Lightning too, right? It's like this zero cost Briar. I think that the magic term was like Cheerio Briar or something like that. But basically every card just costs nothing. It plays Electrify off of Tunic, Blade off of Tunic, stuff like this. That deck was really good against our deck. It was pretty much we started playing that after Chris made top 4 in Cincinnati. And while we kind of got to a point where we were starting to flip the mirror, maybe be in like the 60-40s on the 40 end on the Earth side, every single time, like my sentiment was that I did not enjoy being on the Earth side every single time. Hayden, how did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think probably just taking a step back from my side, right? There was like the Earth 60 card kind of like shell, which, as you say, like pretty unrefined. I think you ran at the ProQuest. I hadn't actually played the deck until the week after the ProQuest. I was still exploring other things, looking at other things. I wasn't convinced that like it was probably the way to attack the meta. And then after that, obviously, we saw the Lightning list. We knew as well that there was a more refined Lightning list that was going to be running around. So we started to play some games of the Earth deck. I think it's really cool. Like the first thing about the Earth deck is that I was really enjoying playing the deck.
It's a fun deck. Right?
General Maharok is such a sweet card. Like it's it does something that's inherently gets you a ton of value. So from that perspective, like it's really cool. So I was enjoying playing that. But yeah, I think as soon as we had an idea of this Lightning deck and this slightly more refined Lightning list as well, that was a lot more focused on these zero costs. Just really difficult, right? Because I think the tough thing, right, is if you look at Embodiment of Earth, such a strong token, right? Such a strong effect from Briar's ability, but doesn't actually line up that well into things that are going wide. Because it's great for like breakpoints, and if you get like 2-3 tokens, 2-3 Embodiment of Earth, that feels great. Then you're like blocking with your 2 defense card for 5. You're blocking with your Plunder for 5 or whatever, or some of your your 3 cost defense cards for 6, and that's really strong against maybe like a Command and Conquer or these like breakpoints at like 5, 6, 7. But when it's like 4, 4, 4, 4. You might, you can have 2 embodiments and that's great, but then you're still costing you a card from your hand every single time, matching up into a card from the opponent. So, and then they're still getting value in certain other ways with like the weapon or with like just being slightly above that breakpoint, or you're not having enough non-attack actions, whatever it is. So, yeah, I definitely felt that probably the deck that was starting to get refined, which is this kind of early Earth build, was in a bit of a tough spot, I think, at that point in the testing.
Yeah, and it was just interesting too because the Earth deck was so new that I don't really it felt like if we were going to adapt the game plan, we almost had to rebuild the deck, which is what was tough when because that's like kind of what was our initial mindset was like for Chain, right? It's like this like core deck just doesn't really work well in the Chain, and it's just like a harder matchup, but that's okay, right? If like 4% of the field is a hard matchup for me, that's okay. But it felt the same way versus Lightning, where it's like, I might have to tweak this entire deck and like change, basically the core philosophy. At that point, like, is it worth it? It might still lose. And if you do that, is it still good versus Bravo and Prism? So if we're talking about questions that we still are asking ourselves when we're figuring out what we're going to play, it's still, how do you beat Prism? How do you have like a good match in the Bravo? But obviously what trumps all of that now, because Lightning Briar went 11-0, was it 11-0? So no, it's 9-0 at UK Nationals. His first is how do you beat Lightning Briar? And that answer probably comes in the form of ice. And in some way, shape, or form, but it's too late. So I think like just to bring it back a little bit, we knew the Lightning Briar existed before UK Nationals. Like Tarek had talked to me at the Cincinnati Calling, said his deck had been, was being played by one of the players, all this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I'll probably still play Earthbriar or like Viscerai or something if Lightning Briar just does okay at UK Nationals. Like if it wins, that's a problem. But if Bravo wins, all good. I'll still play it. It's fine. There can be more of this deck that I have a harder matchup to. That's fine. But then when it goes undefeated, yeah, I pretty much had to reevaluate. And I think that because of the time sensitivity, I am actually going to be playing Lightning Briar. As funny as it sounds.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the cool thing about this current format is that there's this deck that has emerged as a really strong, like, low to the ground power deck. If you look at other TCGs and you look at, okay, we use Magic as an example. Early in a format, aggressive low to the ground decks are often so popular and often do so well because strategies are really linear. People haven't ironed out kinks in their strategies yet. It's hard for them to attack into a new meta and also be able to deal with like a low to the ground deck because often that requires a bit more specialization of certain builds of decks. And it's actually no different in Flesh and Blood, to be honest. But I think the cool thing is, like, unlike Chain in the previous format, where I honestly felt that Chain's ability to play an aggressive game, to play a mid-range game, to play a long fatigue game were just like phenomenal in every sense of the word, across all three of those options. Current builds of Briar, and I'm not saying Briar can't get to there, but just the way Briar is unfolding right now doesn't have those options. You don't get this value off basically having the Spanish zone that you can then craft and manipulate to have the ability to basically inevitably push massive damage on 2 or 3 turns. While you can sort of like stock cards, and you can stack your deck with Briar, you can set up certain combos. There's cards like Flicker Wisp, etc. Like you can sort these out. It's not quite the same. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like deck options for this weekend, I actually feel like there is a lot of options, but like through the purpose of like time and testing, at this point, I'm also leaning towards playing the Lightning Briar deck right now.
Yeah, I think that Lightning Briar right now is the best deck. It does seem like it's a strategy that could be targeted,
Definitely,
and be hated pretty. I wouldn't say easily, but it has a very clear strategy that, and obviously it doesn't like to utilize pitching. So anything that makes it does that or disrupts it, makes it discard cards, gets rid of its go again, it's probably not great for the deck. So while I think that is the best deck, aside from undiscovered things that we'll see on the weekend of US Nationals, if we look at something like New Zealand Nationals or Australian Nationals, I don't know the dates on those. It might be quite dangerous to bring Lightning Briar because at that point, people have seen the deck perform, they've had time to adapt, and there's going to be, most every deck that will be competitive will probably have a solid game plan of like how to beat it, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't worry about New Zealand and Australian Nationals because they'll have a new set for Australia and New Zealand Nationals by that point. Yeah. But the way it's looking,
is that because New Zealand got pushed, or are you?
Yeah, New Zealand's in a very similar state to Australia. It's probably going to be like, well, actually, worse, to be honest, in terms of like the events on the horizon. It's probably looking like early next year, right, for them. So I think so if you say like Lightning Briar is the best deck in the format, I think I would probably agree to an extent. I think it's going to be the best deck up until this Friday, and then it could be the best deck up until Sunday as well. Maybe it won't be.
That's where I am.
But then I think it could be come Friday morning, no longer the best deck in the format pretty clearly when people roll out their strategies. You roll into nationals next weekend. I know like Canada's in a couple of weeks. I know there's some European nationals next week. Very likely that you're probably going to want to take a different deck. So if you're testing right now and you've got 1 week left of testing, I would be trying your strategies into Briar still and trying to figure those out. There is a ton of ways you can take it. Like aggressive Bravo decks do fairly well into it. There is decks that can probably even fatigue it. You have Ice, right? You have Oldham, which can, I'm sure, fatigue. You've got Lexi with like Ice tokens and this ability to force on-hit effects that are like really dangerous and tough to deal with for that deck, as well as Blizzard, which is a pretty good card. So there's like different things out there. It's not like, I honestly felt like the last format, I hate to like bring it back, but like with Chain, I felt like I feel like we threw everything at Chain, right? In terms of being like, how do we beat Chain? Like throwing a million things at it. Whereas already, I think in the last week, I feel like being able to throw things at Lightning Briar, like these things talk about like an old time, like an aggressive Bravo deck. that can consistently beat it, even if it's you're not necessarily favored. You can consistently beat it, which is a good spot to be in. I think it's healthy for the format, so I think people will have strategies.
I mean, honestly, like I'm on Lightning Briar, you're on Lightning Briar. My plan for some of those matchups, whether it's Oldham that has come to life in this past week and has a specific game plan for it, or it's an Ice Lexi deck that is consistently giving me a lot of tokens, disrupting my hand. I'm actually just hoping to dodge those matchups, which is not how I like to play card games. Obviously, coming from Chain, I just had something for everything, but now it's like, yeah, I mean, I just don't have time. Like, this is the game plan I'm playing. I really hope that I don't run into those decks, but if I do, yeah, I'm gonna be trying to play out of a very, very, very bad matchup. But that's the risk I'm taking. That's my trade off for power and switching to a deck, so late here.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Switching that. I think so. I want to take like a step back and just talk about like holistically, like testing. And there's been like I've had quite a few people ask me about this format and what I think. And I think like we said it on the pod like the last 2 weeks. Like if you are looking at a deck right now from like the first 2 weeks of the format, we're basically still in the first month. You need to be able to beat Prism and Bravo. Like those are the first two things, right? And then in the past week and a half, it's been like, or 2 weeks since Cincinnati, it's been like, okay, you also need to be able to beat Briar. Like those are kind of the three things that are should be on your radar right now, right? And then over the past 2 weeks, just for us personally for testing, it's been the same thing. It's been those three things, same things that we've talked about. Hasn't really changed from like, the Bravo Prism perspective and then the Briar perspective over the past 2 weeks. But it's probably been for me like where do you start? Like what do you want to play? Like I've had a lot of different ideas personally. Like I would love to play Rhino this weekend. Like that was the deck that I was really hoping to be able to play. I think that you have you have a pretty reasonable Bravo matchup if you know that matchup and you've played it. Prism I think is a good matchup, especially if you know it, you've played it a lot. It's a good matchup for you. And then the Briar matchup is like that's the really tough one, right? And that's the one where I think if I had more time personally, was a bit more maybe focused on the testing. Like that's the route I would have gone, was like, okay, how do I get Rhino to beat Briar? And I think people can ask that question of themselves next week. Like maybe you're looking at playing Bravo, maybe you're looking at playing Dorinthia, maybe you're looking at playing XYZ. Like I think those are the things I would focus on. Is if you have 2 of 3 good matchups, it's like, okay, then like the third one, like how do I, like what's my strategy for that? And if you have a strategy for those 3, then you're probably ready for well over half the format at that point, which is a cool place to be in.
So I want to get your thoughts because we're just talking about Rhino right now. I actually feel, from a theoretical standpoint, I feel like Claw Rhino like could potentially actually have like a decent matchup into Lightning Briar, right? Like you would kind of just block out, set up for the bellow, then you would come in, right? And even if you're like barraging, so like let's say you're kind of like middle of the road turns, like a barraging beatdown Claw. I mean, demanding 2 cards out of the Lightning Briar deck is really asking a lot. So I think you kind of have like some solid tempo tools. And when you do the, your big barraging beatdown Claw turns, there's not much that Briar can do to interact with you. So I wonder if that's like actually a potentially like legitimate deck to play into Lightning Briar.
Yeah, I actually I have like the club quite high on my list. So I might like, I don't know if, I'm not sure how many people know, but the Claw Rhino deck that was like first seen at New Zealand Nationals in 2020, right, was actually the deck that myself, Jason Long, and Isaac Olsen worked on for New Zealand Nationals. Like that's the deck that came out of that, and both Isaac and Jason were like big Brute players. I think Brute was probably like collectively our favorite hero, so like we're really keen to make that hero work, and that's the deck that came out of that. Was like this Art of War, Bloodrush Bellows, Claw, like hyper aggressive Rhino deck that could also into it's like attacking dash, but then it could also like aggressively play into decks like Dorinthia and Bravo with like some unmovables for like tempo turns. I think like that deck kind of went by the wayside. People still played Claws, but Art of War got cut because you had other options. To be honest, if you're trying to beat a hyper aggressive deck, you have cards like you say, barraging beatdown. That could be a way to go. But there's also this opportunity that maybe because of how efficiently like your cards defend, the ability to play like 4 defense reactions, and your equipment suite is really strong as well. Because you have the leathers. You can play the headpiece. You can even play, Iron Rock Gauntlet. You can play Barkbone Strapping as well. You could take that back a bit and play like this club build that looks to like get in, 8 damage a time with 2 cards of club, right? Until you get them to 20 damage, and then you just like kind of whack them with like that big Rush Bellows turn or whatever. But yeah, I honestly think like Rhino is like a one that I'm still going to continue to explore after this format. And maybe I get to bring Rhino to my nationals. We'll see.
Yeah, so post format, by the way, I actually had this idea this morning. So our testing group is going to continue kind of. Obviously there's going to be a lull of like professional events after national season. We'll go into skirmish season. I think that we've all had our vision refocused on the skirmish is more casual now, so we're not like spiking skirmish events, but because we're keeping the testing. Yeah, I know. But you know that like a lot of people did. My idea for our testing group was that let's do like maybe like a devastation kind of thing, like a hero draft.
Yeah.
And then also just because it's 5 friends, probably put some money in and then play it over like a week or 2. I think it'd be really fun. Just like do fun stuff like that. That's just gonna force people to innovate and deck build and keep playing the game when we don't have like this clear, goal to be working towards.
Yeah, I mean we still have nationals on the horizon, right? So this is
we still got to prepare.
This is only two of the teams nationals this weekend, but we've got Canada in a few weeks, and so we'll be furiously helping to make sure that whatever happens after this, there's some sort of iteration on that. But then we've got kind of this opportunity at the end of the year where, especially for me and Brennan, for what we do for Arsenal Pass and what we do for you guys, we want to do something probably cool, right? And that could be an opportunity, to be honest. I think that if we did that, I would want to record that. I would want us to make sure that we did something with that and got some stuff out there to see like how some of us approach these decks, because personally I love the Devastation series. I thought it was like a great idea. I throw like a little bit of criticism. I didn't think it was that well executed in terms of just like some of the ways that the people who chose the heroes and had they had as much experience, like, and not throwing shade. Obviously, we love Carol. Carol came on. We've had talked to multiple of the team there. But for someone like Carol, right, like for the heroes that he chose, obviously he got like his favorite Rhino, but then he got Kano, and I don't know like how much experience, for instance, Carol had with Kano. Whereas like if you have like a bit of a wider group, and I think if you've got diverse players, like I would be scared, for instance, I think if Dan got to pick up Kano in Classic Constructed, or whoever it is. So
Dan's Kano is just straight off the top. I played against it. That man is crazy.
But yeah, my point is, I think it's like a really cool idea, and we have more heroes back in the pool now, and I think we have a completely different format. So something like that. I've been throwing around, banding around. I'm still going to keep bringing up Welcome to Wraith only format at some point. Want to show down with Brendan. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good to just wipe the floor with you. But I think the most interesting thing about a Welcome to Wraith format is that, on topic, right? Rhino would be played when Rhino was categorically at least played hero in that format, but it was just fantastic into the top deck. So I think it'd be really interesting. People would probably opt to play less drone control if they knew that there was tons of Rhino hanging out. But Hayden, so you're currently playing the event. You're playing Lightning Briar. You switched a bit later than you'd be comfortable with, but that's just how it goes. Let's focus on kind of what comes next, right? So we do have Canadian Nationals, which we're going to prepare for, and probably maybe try to develop a deck that beats this deck and Prism and Bravo. But on the horizon, there's a supplemental set.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most looking forward to in that set? We've already gotten some information. Every class is gonna be supported. Is there anything that you're kind of looking for in particular?
Yeah, I want to put it like just a quick caveat in there, because by the time I think this comes out before I play the event on Saturday. I think this comes out in the morning. But if I'm not playing Lightning Briar, it's because I'm probably at the moment I'm like 95%, but I always reserve my right to audible out of things, especially as I continue to play games. And I'll be there on Friday, jamming some games. I'll probably be playing Rhino. I think I just wanted to say, like, I'm really excited to go to Orlando and to travel and make this trip, and it's going to be an awesome experience to be at the event and then to obviously like hang out with Brendan and the guys. We're going to do some stuff on Monday for the channel, so we're going to do some recording. It's a great last minute opportunity. I want to play a deck that I'm going to have like fun with as well, and I think there's a chance that in the end I could audible. It's a very slim chance, but I just want to reserve my right just in case people call me out afterwards, and I don't play the deck that you're talking about. But yeah, anyway, supplemental set. I'm so excited. I think we got such short notice about like there's going to be a supplemental set coming. We know nothing right now about this, right? I assume that what we're going to get this weekend, given that we've been dropped that something is happening this weekend, is a set. Right? Isn't this?
Was there a hint?
Isn't this what we talked about with Tannen? That on stream they said that the first.
I was just totally lying. Like I was just saying that to try to get him to spoil something.
Oh, I totally believe that. I thought that's what was happening.
Yeah. I was just doing that thing that I do where I just say some ridiculous stuff.
I thought,
But I mean, probably, to be fair, it's just definitely not confirmed.
so my understanding was that I thought that on stream that Tannen had said that the first weekend of November was when preview started. Or was that something that you made up?
I definitely was making up stuff when he was on Time on the Round, and I was like, "Yeah, you can't wait for you to spoil the first card." And he's like, "I did not say that." Yeah, I was lying.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, I guess I don't know. I thought my understanding was based on what had been said that I thought that this coming weekend was like the first.
Figured you would have learned by now.
First weekend of the previous season. So if that's not the case, I mean, it still could be, right? I would expect we hear something. This is the big, this is US Nationals, right? So I assume that we probably get something on coverage. It's a great opportunity for LSS to do so, and they already dropped something, a couple of weekends ago. I reckon we probably get a name this weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's probably we probably get an idea of. I mean, we already know that it's a supplemental set for all the heroes in Wraith so far, which is really cool, or for all the classes, sorry, which is really cool. So I reckon we probably get a supplemental set name, and then probably maybe like some art, some key art, or an idea of maybe we get a card. I don't know. But then it sounds like we are either getting this set in December or January. I would say January seems more likely now, given that date wasn't what I thought it was. I thought we were getting it in December. I was like, this is crazy. Like, we're getting previews this week, and then by the end of November, we're going to have December, we're going to have to release this event. I guess I'm going to have to do some digging.
Have they given a date? I don't know the date.
No. So what my understanding was that on the Cincinnati calling stream, Cincinnati, right? Yeah, after we had it on, that he announced, or he had a message from James White to say, like, here's some information that you can say on stream. And my understanding was that there was a date attached to that for like the start of preview season, which was the start of November. That was my understanding of that. I'm going to feel bad now if we've said this and people have taken that off what we said, and trying to peer pressure Tannen into giving some info.
To be fair, if I can make you feel better, I actually saw the message that James sent Tannen, and it definitely did not have a date. So maybe it came later, but it's probably from me. Who knows what's out there, what's in the ether, if it's confirmed or not. I want to hear though, like I want to hear what you want. Like, what are you looking for in the set, right?
Yeah, everything. No, I mean, I probably want something that's going to change so I think as we've gone through like the formats, we've had some bigger like leaps of gameplay and the way things played. We've had obviously like the talent system come in. I think that shifted like the game quite a bit around, what's currently happening. I want us to get to a point where we probably with a supplemental set where we're seeing like the bang on about it, but like the second cycle of the deck like continue to matter. And I think this is going to annoy you.
You're going to become a meme. I'm telling you.
Fine. I don't mind. I'll be a meme. But I want the second cycle deck to continue to matter. I think there is heroes that need some help in the current format. I think Wizard is one of those where the support is just in a really bad spot. I think in terms of the format. I would actually like to see them probably do some hero specializations, because they're going to provide something for every class. I would even like to see maybe them do like another Azalea specialization, or another Kano specialization if we're only going to have Kano as the lone wizard for a while. I think I'd love to see some different angles for Prism. I think would be really cool. So maybe they dive into like the aura side of the game more, but more of maybe like some like aggressive auras would be really cool. I think they've set up some really interesting things with like the last two sets to enable a supplemental set that helps with certain things. So like if I take this current set, Talsvari, right, and you have all these auras that Guardian got, right, like Emerging Avalanche Sequoia and Embolden. Pretty interesting card. I would love to see maybe them explore that a bit more with a couple of cards that work with Embolden, and that could be a new strategy for Guardians, for instance. So that's probably what I'm looking for. I wouldn't say I have like anything super specific. I'd love to see something cool for that I can put in Rhino. But yeah, what about you? What's your hopes and dreams for Crew 2?
So what about the currency? Like, I mean, copper tokens.
Take it or leave it.
Obviously, we've been. I mean, it's been alluded to that there's these, there's copper, silver, and gold. I mean, eventually they should expand on that.
Probably.
Because like right now it feels pretty weird to have like 7 copper tokens when you're playing Dorinthia. But for me, it's all about the wizard. which is funny because Wizard is a dangerous one to talk about because it's probably one of the ones where it, out of all of the contenders, Wizard is the most likely to be the class that is not getting support only because all of us are bad at it. But secretly, it's really good. You know, I'm always going to go back to when Chris Gehring was on Facebook and everybody was talking bad about Wizard when Arcane Rising came out. And I don't know if this kind of stuff would happen today, but he was like, "You guys have no idea what you can possibly do. You're just bad." I was like, he's probably right. And like we saw Wizard get hated on for so long, and then its power emerged in Blitz with, I think it's probably Nick Holding, I think his name, the Dracolic Ether, and then obviously was championed by quite a few players after that. And it's just, I wonder if that's one of those, like, you know, those classes that's just hard to really give a lot of support because it actually is so powerful, but maybe it's too complex to a level where we're just missing it. But for me, I hope that we get some Wizard support. I would love a more playable Wizard in Classic Constructed. Yeah, but like I said, the whole entire Wizard class, play pattern, everything is just playing with fire, right? Because it can lead to some of the most feel bad
pun intended
game state. Yeah, I mean, it can just, yeah, exactly, pun intended for sure. But it can lead to the most like feel bad like game states and situations in Flesh and Blood for a lot of players. Like I remember playing Kano in Blitz. I played Kano in a lot of Blitz skirmishes. I was just kind of bored of playing Ira, and the salt I would get from my opponents, it was literally like it was just like a side dish you would get if you played Kano. It was guaranteed that you would get some salt.
Really?
Everybody thought that oh my goodness, yes. Everybody thought that it was just 100% RNG. Everything was off the top. That's just how it goes. There was nothing they could do. When actually they just played like, you know, really badly. And that's why they lost. Because like, you know, obviously there is some play pattern, but at its core, right, Kano is the most solitary hero, right? If you're playing Kano, your opponent's skill matters like way less than anything else. It doesn't matter. It's not 0%, but it's pretty low for sure. Definitely in Blitz. But yeah, that was
that's a contradictory statement.
Yeah. What was contradictory? What did I say? I could have just said
that maybe they played poorly, but then also their skill doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, the ones who get the angriest are always the ones who played the most poorly, right? Like they just jammed everything into me and tried to do like 15 damage or something, and then they died to burn because they had no cards.
Yeah, I think
that's just how it goes, and it's like, yeah, I guess.
I think there's definitely some elements of. I think the more you play Kano, the better you will be against Kano. I think because you understand like the play patterns and when told you're blue, when to take the damage, when to just play into it, and if they have it, they have it. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes there's like, do you have it sort of scenarios? Because if you get the game go another turn, then they will definitely have it because you know that they have the 2 cards set up or whatever, etc., etc. So I think it's one of those heroes. The more that you actually play Kano, the more you probably can understand and play better against Kano, which is quite cool. But yeah, I would agree. Like I guess the ability of your opponent to interact with you is like reasonably light on. Like it's, you know, probably it can range from like maybe, you know, if this is like the whole game here, right? Then there may be like this little bit in the middle is like where they have play and, you know, they can give themselves like some negative advantage and they can give themselves a slight positive advantage, but it's very hard to completely outplay Kano, I think, because a lot of the time there's so many variables of like, do they have XYZ, like which cards are on top of Spindle, like what are they lining up with their Sonic Boom?
And sometimes what you have is just 100% irrelevant. You're like, I've got the blue, and the Kano's like, just, you know, there is a sequence or line that he can take where it doesn't matter if you have the blue. It doesn't matter if you have the sigil. You can have both. It's fine. It's like if he takes like this 10% sequence rather than going for like the 50% or something else like that, then it doesn't matter what you have. You just lose. And being on that side of it, you're like, pretty frustrating.
Yeah, that was the worst. Yeah, when you're like, okay, well, I could play around sigil, but I don't think I can actually win this game. So have you drawn the second sigil? Let's find out. And just is that the card in Arsenal? Could be a Razor Reflex, and you get punished just as hard when they come in and kill you anyway. So I digress. Kano chat.
Yeah, I'm also thinking maybe some Runeblade support too. We just haven't gotten much recently, so just bring on the Runeblades, baby.
I would be fine with some Runeblade support. So I would probably like to see.
This, right?
I was gonna say some chain support.
Oh God.
Yeah, why not? Like, I would love to see. Like, I think chain has like a unique spot where obviously Seeds of Agony is banned, right? I would like to see something different be done with that. Like, I would love to see, and I think they need to print a non-attack action that has Blood Debt for chain. But isn't Seeds of Agony. So it needs to be balanced, right? I think it needs to be more balanced. And it doesn't even need to be arcane damage. It could be a different tech entirely, right? Which could be really cool to see. So it could be to do with like deck manipulation or whatever. It doesn't need to be a cantrip, for instance. But I think there's an interesting spot there that I think you can explore. And same with Levier. Like I think Levier has some interesting design space to explore. So I think every hero. I'm glad this is a supplemental set for every hero. And that there's things that they could do on the back of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if we're going to get legendary armor, because like in Crucible we have legendary armor for every single supported class, right?
Majestic, you mean?
Majestic, yeah.
Yeah. Which that'd be cool. I think the armor suite in this game is like really starting to fill out, right? It's actually really, to be honest, I'm like a little bit disappointed in some ways about like how strong some of those armor pieces are, because I think there's some really cool pieces of like Snapdragon Scalers, right? Which is obviously like really iconic at this point. Really strong piece of leg equipment. That has 0 defense and is at common. But there's also some other really cool ones, like, that we don't really get talked about, like Merchant's Hood, or like Braces of Belief, I think is like a really, really interesting card that doesn't really get talked about.
First Fist.
Yeah, like Fist the First Fist, I think, is like a really powerful card. But because of all these other now equipment options we're getting to, and as we get more and more, these cards become less and less relevant, I think. I don't know. I wish that we maybe had some more time with these cards and they had a bit more impact on formats. Also maybe we're looking at the deck building incorrectly. Yeah.
Is it true that Iron Rot is the only thing in the game, only card in the game that's strictly worse than another card? Because like Iron Rot Helmet is strictly worse than, Arcanite Skullcap, and Chest is strictly worse than Skelata.
Well, I mean, and when you talk about class specification, apart from Skullcap, I mean, more I can say, okay, Iron Rot Chest is strictly worse than Tunic, right?
In Tunic, yeah.
But
yeah, and Tunic is strictly, yeah.
But you wouldn't say that Iron Rot, like Gauntlet, is strictly worse than anything, right? Because a generic that defends for one, not every deck has access to, an arm slot that defends. So it's not.
But I think that those pieces specifically are the only ones in the game that are actually just strictly worse on like every vector, right? I think so. Could be wrong.
Then what? Like it's contextual,
then
right?
their counterparts, right? Yeah. Then Tunic, right? Like Iron Rod Chest.
Is sure. For the
every single time worse.
Right, for the generic commons versus legendary. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of makes sense, right? Like Iron Rod is clearly, either a limited piece or a piece of budget equipment, which does a job and is like perfectly serviceable. Iron Rod Helmet is actually not that much worse than Skullcap, in in a reasonable amount of situations. I mean, it makes sense, right? I would just be interested. I think the League slot is the most interesting slot in armor pieces, personally. But
is that because of the current pairs of boots that exist, or just in general?
Yeah, I think you've got, so you obviously have Snapdragon Scales, pretty iconic at this point. You've got Scabskin Leaders, which I think is a really interesting piece of League equipment. You've got Spellbound Creepers, which is kind of with Tales of Raya, which is like super, super interesting and like really unexplored, I think, and is actually a really powerful piece of equipment that I think we're going to see impact the Classic Constructor format and the Blitz format pretty massively at some point. What else do you have in the League slot?
Storm Shaders.
Yeah, you have Storm Shaders, which is obviously, which is like bread and butter. I think what's the one that came out with Monarch, the Warrior one?
Oh, that's the greatest gold cold foil you can get. That's the Valiant Dynamo.
Valiant Dynamo. That's also really interesting because it has this like repetitive effect. I think Phantasmal Footsteps is like a pretty interesting card. Anyway, I just think like the League slots is one of the most interesting, or the most interesting spot of equipment in this game. But yeah, kind of gone off track there. Sorry, but I would love to see.
That's all good. We're totally off track. And since we're off track, I want to mention this too. If you ever top 8 a pro event and you're getting your gold foil, there's a little prayer that everybody says, and that's "Don't be Husk and don't be Valiant Dynamo," because like everything else is at a certain level, and those two are just, those are the worst to get for sure.
I'll take the Valiant Dynamos and the Husks. That's all right.
Yeah. It's an investment for later. But anyway, Hayden, let's go ahead and wrap it up. We got a big weekend ahead of us. It's going to be, I'm really interested for the period after these nationals. Obviously we got the Canadian one to focus on, but that's going to be an interesting time in Flesh and Blood. Skirmish starts back up. We all get to kind of relax and breathe. I know it's maybe not been, you've not felt it quite as much, but over here, like for, Dante and myself, and I know Zach as well, is like this past month or month and a half has been quite quite a grind, but in a weird kind of meditative way. It's just been fantastic, right? Just like every single weekend, you just fly somewhere new. You're there, you do the event, you kind of put in your work, and then I don't know, you just go home, then you come back, and like there was something that was really awesome about that. And I think I'm always going to look back at that. It's just like a really fond memory in my life. Like it was such a cool little circuit we did. But I'm definitely looking down to some downtime. I actually booked. I'm gonna be so November like 20th through January like 2nd. I'm actually just gonna be living in the woods out in Colorado. I just booked a place like totally off grid, which I know sounds fantastic for you because we have to curate content, but I will have internet.
No, I was just going to say, Paul Woods, they have to put up with you for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously, a super cool way to start, like, OP and competitive level play in North America over the past 6 weeks. Obviously, sort of concluding this weekend, but it's not the last event that we have. We've obviously got more nationals coming out. We've got Canadian nationals. We've got New Zealand nationals at some point. We've got many other nationals in between there as well, Australian, of course. And then we've got, of course, the European calling, Utrecht, in first weekend of December. So that kind of, I guess, that's the penultimate event of the calendar for Flesh and Blood. And then it's just, I guess, we get the skirmish season, which is really cool. If you haven't already checked out what skirmishes are happening around you, I believe that the first one is happening next weekend after the calling and runs through till December. There's draft skirmishes at this point, so a really cool thing to go check out. But then it's just a kind of, I guess, a wait and see of like what happens into Jan, Feb, and the next lot of events. But yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to say before we sign off for time around this week is just around the classic constructor format again. I think I just want to reiterate this because I feel like I've had a lot of questions over the past few weeks about this format in particular, and like, with the emergence of like Lightning Briar over the past 2 weeks, like, am I worried about this format? The answer is no. I'm not worried about this format at all. I think it's a very different feeling to the format that we had previously, where there is definitely strategies that can target and beat Briar, like without a doubt. And I think we're actually in a really healthy spot where we're not in just a straight up, okay, if you play a deck that beats that, then you have no game versus everything else. I also don't think that's true. And I think we're going to see evolution of the format as we move through into the rest of nationals, and then of course into the last calling of the year in December. So I'm actually really excited to see like what happens next and to explore. I actually felt like in the last format, I was like, okay, how do we beat Chain, and like what's the strategy here? And there was some strategies you can employ, I think, that could get you a reasonable matchup, but they felt miserable and they didn't feel like the sort of decks that you want to play. I actually feel with like the current format, there's so many things that I want to try and explore because I think that it is actually that open. So yeah, I just wanted to end on that and say that I am feeling positive about the current class constructor format and can't wait to play in Orlando this weekend.
Awesome. Well, good luck in your event today. Hopefully I'm not joining you because that would be a bad thing. But yeah, until next time, active player turn 0, 1 additional turn.
It's time in the round.